A few weeks ago, a PhD with zero trading experience built a fully automated trading system in just 6 days using AI. It connects to exchanges, it reads the news, it sizes positions, it manages risks, and it trades 24 hours a day. And this guy says that this could break financial markets because if there's thousands of these systems all operating all the time, all in the same way, they can make the same trade at the same time and lead to a big market crash. But the problem is, this isn't new. The markets have already seen this dynamic over and over again, in fact. So the question isn't really, is AI trading dangerous, introducing some new systemic risk to the system, but what actually changes with the system that already exists?
It's the root of all evil, of strife and upheaval, but I'm certain, honey.
Before we get to that, there's actually quite a bit of news this week. So the Department of Justice dropped its inquiry into Powell and the Fed about their building renovation, clearing the way for Warsh to be confirmed as the next Fed chair. He was indeed confirmed by the Senate Banking Committee.
Warsh was confirmed, yeah. Yep, he's the next Fed chair.
I don't know if you watched that, Luke, but Warren had a last
Jesus,
stand.
Joe, don't say any senators' names. Don't even say senators. Cut that out. She who shall not be named. Joe, seriously, we're gonna try to do this. We're gonna make it super clear that this is not an election ad. Because I'm really pissed. I'm like upset about that. It's a kind of censorship. It really is.
Second big piece of news. After many years of beneath the surface, bristling with Saudi Arabia and other OPEC members, the UAE finally decided to leave OPEC formally this week. This is seriously challenging the group's already diminished impact during the ongoing largest oil shock in history. Next, Xi Jinping blocked a $2 billion acquisition of a Chinese AI startup after the deal was already closed and investors were already paid out. And finally, during the FOMC, Powell's last as chair, they delivered a bit of a hawkish hold, but more surprisingly, Powell finally confirmed that he is going to stick around on the board, at least for a little while.
I've said that I will not leave the board until this investigation is well and truly over, with transparency and finality, and I stand by that.
I'm not fucking leaving!
After my term as chair ends on May 15, I will continue to serve as a governor for a period of time to be determined.
Oh my God, he's holding it hostage. He's holding the position hostage. He's saying,
Kind of,
you
and
get
it's-
all of this, you get all this legal stuff off my back, and then I'll step down and clear up a spot for you. Wow.
Pretty much. Given all of those legal things, is he incentivized to stay on if he thinks he's going to be targeted more aggressively if he leaves? I built an AI trading platform in 6 days. That's terrifying. What do you think, Luke? Clickbaity enough?
Yeah, kind of part of it. It's an art, definitely. One that we have not mastered yet, but we're working on it.
So this story is coming from a guy that has a PhD in hydrology. So he says he has no background in financial markets or trading. And in a course of just less than a week using Claude Code, he created a full end-to-end autonomous trading system. He goes on to talk about why that's dangerous. Now that basically anyone has access to these very sophisticated trading tools, everyone's going to pile into the same trades, and it's going to make market crashes much more frequent and much more severe. And his conclusion that regulators need to start regulating individuals trading with these tools as well, not just banks and institutional investors as they do today.
Do you feel like this guy's a plant? You know what I mean? By lawmakers that want to regulate this more? He really
That's
argued for that
interesting.
in the just because I've been reading so much about politics in general, and about like Nixon, and just everything they think about is in terms of politics. That's just how he thinks, just how these people think. You can't help but wonder, and they know that you can plant stories. I think it's part of the job.
Interesting. Yeah, I guess it's possible, but I would say that like some of his proposals seem a little too broad, a little too out there, I think, to reasonably implement in any kind of near or even medium term. So towards the end, in his conclusions, he kind of gives three areas of regulation that he thinks should be focused on. So he says, first, AI companies should be required to monitor and disclose the extent to which their models are used for autonomous financial trading. Second, exchanges should implement correlation-aware circuit breakers. And then third, regulators should create a mandatory registration framework for autonomous trading systems, regardless of capital deployed.
Yeah, usually like the big ask is like the third one. The first two kind of lulls you to sleep. Then the big ask is the last one. And I guess in this case, if they're asking for a register of absolutely everyone who's trading, and like the model and stuff that they're using, that sort of goes against my libertarian values in some ways. Okay. And you said this was mainly around, he was looking at the poly market, kind of that area?
Yeah, he said poly market and Kalshi.
Is that something that
So-
like you and I can go on and start like placing bets? Or do we need to like register with poly market? Is this a play towards poly market? Who's the big fish, Joe?
I don't know.
What's the play here, Joe?
To me, he called up poly market just because it is the hot thing going on. Like even just looking at X, I see a lot of people just posting clickbaity things about, I made my trading system operates 24/7 while I sleep, making me all this money on poly market.
Oh, interesting.
More specifically, what he says is what distinguishes this moment from previous waves of algorithmic trading is the barrier to entry. He says high frequency trading required co-located servers and PhD physicists. Quantitative hedge funds required millions of dollars in capital. But what I demonstrated is that a single person with no relevant background can build a competitive autonomous trading system in less time than it takes to process a mortgage application.
Does he actually give any numbers as to how much he put in and then how much he's earned to date?
No, of course not. I don't have the numbers in front of me. Yeah, but the scale of capital deployed in these platforms is like so extremely minuscule compared to, financial markets more broadly. There was some other analysis I saw that it showed a distribution of how much each wallet was making or losing. Like the majority were, people were making more or less than $10, decent amount to 100. And by the time you got it to 10,000, there's barely anything there. So the scale of what people are gaining or losing on some of these trades are like at most tens of thousands of dollars in very small, a very small number of people are operating at that level.
Okay. So they're not very big right now. That's we give them a pass on that. And I guess these are like gambling markets. I guess
Effectively.
So like let's assume that he got like some really good returns or whatever and was able to do it. I think to your point, and probably if I'm sort of reading your room a little bit, reading our rooms, we're in two different rooms. But if I'm reading the room a little bit, I think you're probably going to say that, yeah, as soon as you start introducing, like maybe right now there is a lot of ways in which you can take advantage of the quote unquote market that's going on in poly market, as has always been the case in just the broader markets, the broader financial markets. Whenever a new inefficiency in the market has been identified, people can take advantage of it, but only for a certain amount of time. Because once everyone has found it, then that goes away and the market becomes more efficient. So like you can go back and read different stories about people discovering or hedge funds discovering certain trades. And then, yeah, as like that hedge fund gets rich on it, people who work there go to different hedge funds and they all share what they just learned and then they iron it out to nothing. And like algorithmic trading is a perfect example where nowadays it's like you can't really make money just in arbitrage off of like, I don't know, foreign exchange or something. Because it's just they got so many algorithms just running it all the time that just squeezes any of the money you could get out of that to nothing. So it's more efficient now. That's what I'm guessing is going to happen. And right now, if this poly market thing is so young, then yeah, I'm sure there are a lot of inefficiencies in there that need to be ironed out. And, maybe the bigger fish or whatever haven't gotten into it yet because there's not enough money to get there. But it'll get ironed out. Markets will get more efficient. That'd be my guess. That's my take just after listening to you for a second. But that's only after we regulate them a lot, Joe. Only after we register every single one who's attached to these poly market things. Yeah, no, that doesn't make sense. So
everyone attached to poly market and everyone that uses the AI systems would need to register according to this, proposal.
Yeah, no, I don't. And what else did they say? They need to have an exchange like circuit breakers.
Yeah, I mean that's more reasonable, but
maybe
I mean those things already exist. Well, he does have a point that having this sophisticated software being democratized could reasonably change things. It's not that it's going to create some sort of new systemic risk in financial markets. Two things is that he kind of ignores the impact of scale of capital, as well as the point that all agents are not homogeneous. He makes this assumption that AI is this magical thing. Everyone has it in the same way. Therefore, everyone's strategies will be the same. Crucially, including people like himself, retail traders, and sophisticated institutional investors will do the same thing. And that's just not the case. All agents are not created equally. So at the end of the day, we need to remember that AI isn't this magical thing. It's just sophisticated software. So if you put in poor inputs, you're going to get poor outputs. This is really no different than kind of smart money versus dumb money today. You've got your Robinhood traders and you've got your day traders, and then you've got people
like that's you and me, right? That's the smart money.
Exactly. Well, no, the smart money. No, it's like
yeah, right. We're the dumb money. Sorry, guys. Yeah.
So all the people at Citadel and Jane Street and all of these biggest places that you hear about, they are going to be using the same tools, but they're obviously not going to be using it in the same way. There's no reason that someone that's getting paid millions of dollars today is going to use the same just off the shelf Claude bot you downloaded in 20 minutes to make your whole trading strategy. The inputs that you put into it is going to be far different. The way in which you select information is going to be different. So you're still going to have your Robinhood traders and you're still going to have your hedge fund traders.
I mean, even just the amount of information that you have access to.
Exactly.
Bloomberg, for instance, how much does a Bloomberg license cost? What is it, like $30,000 a year or something? Dumb money,
something like that.
Institutional investors will pay for that. Bloomberg is insane how much information. Like if you could somehow just hook up an AI to Bloomberg, that's when you start getting to really scary like AGI stuff. If they can start making connections that simple people, you just can't hold that many factors in your head at once. That's what blows my mind. Like if anything, if you could find something that could reliably predict interest rates, that's super intelligence. If you could do it. Someone who could draw a line between like FX, commodities, stock, bonds, interest rates. That's AGI. That's super intelligence.
Yeah. So that's pretty much the holy grail of AI, AGI, financial markets.
That's when obviously people are out of the system anymore. That's just like, okay, people can't do it. You can't keep up with it.
Right. So I don't want to get speculative here, but I think that fundamentally that will never exist.
Okay. Making a call here.
I see it in the same way that I see. So if you assume that, then you get to the doomsday scenario where it's like, okay, people aren't needed for anything anymore. At that point, okay, AI is going to be doing everything, but what are they going to be doing?
Sorry, yeah. Can I make a distinction here? There's like two sides of it, right? There's the speculators, and then there's one who actually tap the financial markets kind of for what they're really supposed to be, which is to like, I don't know, get like a future to make sure that you can lock down your revenues a year in advance, because you want to curtail risk, right? You just want to manage risk of like FX movements. So you start doing different swaps and stuff. That's really what they're supposed to be there for. So that's one half, and people will still be using that. The speculation stuff, that's different. Yeah. So yeah, there are two halves to financial markets.
And so I guess my view there is that fundamentally, there will be no all-knowing AGI that can just seamlessly put all of these pieces together in such a way that we just can't see right now. Because AI already is built in to the Bloomberg terminal in these really sophisticated ways. There's thousands of people that have access to it every day at work. That doesn't mean that we're suddenly able to draw these amazing connections. Even these AI models have limits as to what kind of signal you can find in noise.
Right. But we're not at AGI or whatever levels. We're not at and I don't even know what like the input would look like. I'm trying to imagine that if you could just like somehow plug in that much compute into a Bloomberg terminal, which we don't even have that connection yet. So this is still theory stuff, but
I mean, yeah, we're starting to get a little bit philosophical here, because it's like, to answer, is the random walk real? Or if you theoretically knew every piece of information that existed, could you reliably predict every market movement?
Yeah, that's what I think it is. I think it's like,
my view is the opposite.
My comparison is like, okay, cool. Oh, we found a big point of disagreement then. No, I think I sort of take the Douglas Adams analogy, where the world is just a giant computer. It's just so incredibly complicated, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't. It is something. If it knew and was aware of all of its moving parts, wouldn't have predictive capabilities. It's like physics and all that. We're just we know where Mars is going to be 1,000 years from now. We have very good predictive powers. We have very good physics models, but we have very poor economic and financial models, and that's just because there is no deterministic thing here. It's just because the variables, and that's like you, me, free will, people making all these decisions and stuff like that. There's simply no way to measure it, and there's no way as of now to naturally predict it and understand how it's all related. That's sort of what makes, in some ways, trying to predict financial markets more complicated than like physics. It's or like economics, and it's just our models are crap right now. That's not to say they couldn't be worked out. You just need something far smarter than a person. That's my opinion.
Yeah, which is like a fundamental divide. Like, do you think there is an intrinsic, irreducible source of randomness out there in the ether that's making the world spin? You're not drawing deterministic relationships between things. You're drawing statistical relationships, and the best you can do is reducing your tracking error to just pure white noise, because that's a fact of reality that no matter what you do, you can't reduce anymore.
Yeah, right. It is like the financial markets. Are we working in physics at like the quantum mechanics level, where it's just like kind of random stuff? Or are we operating at the more macro level, where it's much more deterministic?
Right. And so, that's the
fair
thing, because macro markets, yes, they do look a little more deterministic, and that's where guys like Ray Dalio got their start, basically putting these things together in the 1970s with their earliest computers, when no one was even thinking about doing linear regressions about wheat futures against different interest rates. He was like one of the early pioneers of that, and that's how he built his empire fundamentally. But it's out there in the world. You're talking macro. What's moving the world? Yes, if interest rates go up, maybe you think equities are going to go down. But no matter how well you can model things, you never know when Trump gets in a bad mood and tweets something insane. There's always just going to be some left field thing, and that's what truly drives markets. Because as soon as everyone figures out these relationships, then there's really no market movement anymore, because everyone's already positioned for it. It's these fundamentally just left field things that I think are just a fact of our world, and then the conclusion, at least my view, is that you really can't get to this all-knowing AGI that solves financial markets. Or, I'm in financial markets. Maybe I'm just trying to justify my own profession in the AI era.
No, that's a good point. I mean, the fact that, you got market movers, sure, and that's really unpredictable. AI has not,
I think it's kind of like law too. Like by definition, the field of law, jurists, judges, by definition, like they operate at the edges. At the edges of the law, they make arguments for how it should or shouldn't be, and then you adjust the law a little bit thereafter. Dostoevsky said, no two crimes are ever exactly the same. Every single crime that ever happens is fundamentally new in some way. I think it's kind of the same way that I think about markets in a weird way.
Okay. Well, that's a good point. I didn't think of it that way. All right.
This is good. This got far more philosophical than I planned on. But I think
everything. If you drill down far enough, everything is philosophy. I find. I think. I never really understood that. I never really believed that when I was whenever I was younger, they would talk about philosophy. Like, what does it mean to be? How do we know something really? And you would roll your eyes and be like, this is stupid philosophy stuff. But as I got older, and I would recommend Stephen Hicks. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he wrote a book called Explaining Postmodernism. And he, I think, is the first one to show me just how incredibly powerful philosophy is. And really, I wish I studied it. And I think I would recommend other people to study philosophy. But yeah, anyway, I think that's everything. Anytime you drill down far enough, you come to a philosophical debate, ultimately.
And just modern day current events, whenever I think about AI and, you quickly get to philosophical questions because the knee-jerk reaction is these things are really incredible. We've never seen anything like it before.
Yeah.
How far can they go?
Yeah. Actually, I want to take a little, there's a tiny, tiny thread there that I want to pull on because I've been thinking about this. And I've been thinking about it in the context of just the recent bit of news that's all over the headlines and stuff with this Musk versus Altman thing. Yeah. I mean, it's happening now. Big deal. Musk is, suing Altman and OpenAI for basically turning a charity, like a nonprofit, into a for-profit thing. And he's saying that's, this should be illegal. I'm going to challenge it. But, and then obviously, Musk is out there and he's saying all these bad things about scam Altman. He's sort of taking a bit out of Big Daddy's playbook here and changing the name a little bit, right? Sleepy Joe. I think you get
Careful, Luke.
God, I got to be really careful. This is tough. I really feel like I literally feel like I'm dancing around a censor. This is so stupid. This is outrageous. This is not a campaign ad. The philosophy part of it, what I wanted to get on, had to do with one of the most interesting interviews that I saw Sam Altman. First off, just to lay forward, I don't really like Sam Altman. I never really liked him. From kind of the first thing I heard him say anything, which is this tiny little clip about him talking about SVB, Silicon Valley Bank. I don't think you'd ever remember that, but he made this quip in that really condescending way that he talks, that slow, if I'll slow it down for you because you're so stupid, right? He kind of quipped how it was stupid of SVB to, I forget what he said exactly, but it was you probably shouldn't lend such long-term on such short-term liabilities. I
think they just horribly mismanaged buying while chasing returns in a very silly world of 0% interest rates. Buying very long-dated instruments secured by very short-term and variable deposits. And this was obviously dumb. I think totally the fault of the management team, although I'm not sure what the regulators were thinking either.
I scrunch my face up, and that's an accurate description of all of commercial banking. That's basically what they're doing. maturity mismatch and
Maturity
stuff.
transformation.
So it was like, sorry, Sam. So you mean to say that all commercial banking is just a stupid business plan? I don't think he realized that's sort of what he was implying, but it's just so incredibly, yeah. He walks into a room and I think he just has to, he expects gratitude from everyone for not, for his not crushing everyone with the weight of his intellect, because he could just turn it on and you would just be like turned into a potato. How stupid you are. That's like the impression kind of I get. It was the Tucker Carlson and Sam Altman interview, like way back. And the big thing that came out of that one that everyone talked about was when Carlson had started asking Altman about this, the mysterious circumstances around the death of one of his employees that was like ruled a suicide. But then Carlson was like asking him like, hey, there's a lot of weird stuff going on in here. Altman goes back and is like, well, excuse me? Like, what are you implying? I forget exactly what he said, but that was like what everyone was talking about. There was a separate part in that interview that I thought actually was much more interesting. And that had to do when Carlson was pressuring Altman to ask, like, what are the moral framework that you put around ChatGPT? And the thing he was asking about specifically, I think, was like suicide. It was like assisted suicide and stuff like that. It's like, and these were tough questions. But listening to Altman try to give an answer, I was struck by how much what it felt like what he was doing. And now you're going to have to just kind of trust my read on this. And I'm just going to let you know, this was like my own gut reactions to what Altman was doing. So, go watch it yourself and make your own decisions. But it felt like Altman was just kind of looking, the answer that Altman was looking for was just, what do you want me to say? Like, what's the best thing that you would want that you want to hear? What do you want to hear? And I'll give it to you. Right. And you can see him sort of throw out a couple ideas. Carlson kind of knocked it down. And then you could see Altman kind of go back into his head, try to rework a different approach and then come back with that. And like, that's, it just became very clear that ChatGPT does not have a like philosophical basis of what it's going for. As it is now, it's sort of a reflection on its creator, which is Altman. And its philosophical basis is just, what do you want to hear? If you don't want to hear that, I got some other answers for you. And when you talk to ChatGPT, that's almost kind of what it's like. It's been criticized for being a little sycophantic. You're right. Hey, great idea. Right?
Yeah.
And that's almost like Altman, and that's sort of the philosophical.
Musk is very critical. The one meme where it was like Lord of the Rings, where it was like that part at the beginning is like, oh well, why shouldn't I keep the ring? And it does a ChatGPT window. You know what? You're exactly right. Yeah, we did find it after all. And you know what?
See that? Yeah,
great job.
I didn't see that. It's funny. Yeah, exactly. But like, I just contrast that approach with ChatGPT, the sycophantic, whatever you want to do. Let me, good vibes, with how I feel how Musk would have answered that question. And at the very beginning, he always is talking about, it's the philosophical stuff. He says truth and curiosity. So I think if Musk was in that spot and he got pressured about that stuff, he would probably say, and I don't know here, my guess would just be, what's the honest answer? I would just tell him the truth. They ask me an honest question, I'll give them an honest answer. So like,
it sounds good, but a lot of what AI is used for is, aren't yes or no, or true or false questions. People ask about, relationships and all kinds of things that are very rarely point in one direction or the other. So not Musk, not Grok, not ChatGPT or Sam Altman, but Anthropic. So they do a lot of research on this that they publish, and I think it's really good. It's very thought-provoking. But their latest answer to this in a paper just from a couple months ago is that the biggest risks around people using these models comes down to three things. Reality distortion. You don't want to have the AI convince you the world isn't the way that it really is. Value judgment distortion. You don't want to have the AI make a moral call for you. You want to have it always kind of give you information, but ultimately highlight to you, in some way, what's your moral framework on this? Like why are you thinking about it this way or that? And then the last one is action distortion. Don't act in such an authoritative way from the AI that people feel like, oh, I need to do what it's suggesting to me because it feels so authoritative.
Okay. Keep your own counsel. Yeah, keep your own counsel. Keep your own agency. What was the first one?
Just don't be misled about reality. That's the obvious one. Like reality distortion.
Yeah, don't lie. Keep your own counsel. Keep your own agency. Well, that's a good. I agree with that. We try to do here on this podcast. Form your own opinions. You have to keep your own counsel. Yeah, I mean shouldn't lie. Honesty is always the best policy. But like, if there's one person who's like the one person you should never lie to, Joe.
Yourself.
Yep.
The Man in the Glass.
What's that?
It's a poem, but it's basically, the man in the mirror.
Oh, nice, Joe. Dropping in some poetry. Shit. Look that up.
We got philosophy, we got poetry, we got finance.
The Man in the Glass?
Yeah.
Who wrote it? Peter Dale Wimbrow Sr., The Man in the Glass. When you get what you want in your struggle for self, and the world makes you king for a day, just go to the mirror and look at yourself and see what that man has to say. For it isn't your father or mother or wife whose judgment upon you must pass. The fellow whose verdict counts most in your life is the one staring back from the glass. He's the fellow to please, never mind all the rest, for he's with you clear to the end, and you've passed your most difficult, dangerous test if the man in the glass is your friend. You may fool the whole world down the pathway of years and get pats on the back as you pass, but your final reward will be heartache and tears if you've cheated the man in the glass. Wow, that's great. I never heard that. Oh, thanks for that, Joe. Yeah, I didn't know about that. Peter Dale Wimbrow Sr. Yeah, that's what it's all about. You just can't, I think so much of even just getting out of like depression, I think, and all that. I think that so much of that has to do with just you lying to yourself. And part of that also means just trying to put up a face that is amenable to like broader society or whatever, even if it disagrees with certain, even if it, if you put up this mask or whatever and you say things that do things that you maybe disagree with on whatever moral or truth basis or something. And that's really taxing. And I think a lot of depression comes from that. I'm thinking about this, I lived through, my time in New York during the height of like the whole wokeism crowd. And that's kind of where I kind of learned this stuff, where you're forced to say and do things that you just know are wrong, or inaccurate or whatever. And it's very taxing. And I think too many people are living under that. So if I were to describe like why, depression or whatever, all these like mental issues are coming up, I think a big part of it is people lying to themselves. Indirectly, just acting on things that are not true. But anyway, again, that's nice. Thanks for that, Joe. I didn't know about that.
With that, thanks for tuning in.
All right, to another episode of the Lost Poet Society. No way. Okay. I don't know, but I like that. All right. So anything else you want to say on this, about this Aqua guy? What was he? He works with water.
Yeah, no,
what was
hydrology?
Hydrology?
I've never even heard of that field before.
Okay, good. I'm glad I'm not the only one. Not to make fun of him. I'm sure it's super hard and all that stuff. I just don't know about it. Okay. I'm not making fun of him. If anything, it's my own ignorance that I'm embarrassed for, but I just don't know what that is. Hydrology, movement, distribution, and management of water on Earth and other planets. Okay, sure.
And other planets. Nice.
All right, tell me about the Saudi Arabia and OPEC thing and the UAE. So they left the block.
So OPEC, they're kind of the strong arm in the oil industry, or in the global oil markets. I think they've been around for like 6 decades now. They were fully in control during the 1970s energy shocks, just completely controlling the amount of energy and kind of dictating all of these very harmful outcomes ultimately that occurred. But over time, their influence has been gradually diminishing, and in large part because of the shale revolution in the US. So, just far more oil and gas production capacity weakened their ability to control prices through controlling supply. And they've been fighting against that, but just naturally they've been losing this influence. And Saudi Arabia is the largest in it. They're kind of seen as like the kingpin in charge. And the UAE is geographically right next door. They're kind of seen as like the little brother to Saudi Arabia. So it's been kind of a slow burning thing, I guess, that the UAE has been kind of upset with the bloc in general, particularly Saudi Arabia. Apparently, UAE is one of the only other members with Saudi Arabia that has like substantial excess capacity that they could be producing, but they're just not allowed to because of all these very tight constraints that the bloc places on all of its members. So there's that's been going on in the background for a long time. And then obviously current events today with the Strait blocked. The UAE is also in an interesting position. So they're just geographically, they're right on the edge of where the Strait is. Part of their border is before the Strait, but they ship oil from that and use the Strait. But the other side, you can cross. They can go to the other side of their country and bypass the Strait, and then just go straight out into the ocean from there. So the other thing that they see is that we're already hamstrung before this terrible conflict occurred. The biggest energy shock in history, it's being called now, just in terms of numbers of barrels of oil. They're extra hamstrung, obviously, because of that. So they're pulling away. So we're not going to listen to OPEC anymore. We're going to do what we want. And most of the other OPEC members are severely constrained by the Strait being closed. So this is a way, at least that I saw, to for the UAE to just strategically bypass all of those things. And then there's also an angle of it's kind of reordering some of its priorities in terms of geopolitics. So this kind of move naturally realigns itself more with the US than some of these Middle Eastern states.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, that's really what stood out to me is like, is this a total coincidence? They just do this, or they're under some other pressures that we just can't see?
Yeah.
No doubt it's the latter. Yeah. Okay. No, interesting. That's a good update. So do you want to cover this? The China blocked the $2 billion acquisition. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, sure. Late last year, Mark Zuckerberg put together this deal and closed it. He paid for the company. Investors got paid. It's done. But I think on Monday this week, Xi Jinping just came out and said, "No, you're not doing that."
Yeah. I looked into it a little bit, and I'll just give like a brief summary as to kind of what's happened. But unfortunately, I have more questions really than I have answers. Yeah. So there were two things about the Manus story that sort of stood out to me that I would really have a lot of questions about. One had to do with the jurisdiction. Like one of the takes that I had to do with the jurisdiction that somehow Xi Jinping is able to stop this IPO, or presumably be able to stop the investment, even though the country is not based in China. It's a Singaporean, I guess, country. They moved it over to Singapore just in order so they can facilitate some of these investments. So that's like the first question I'd have is like, how just practically is this going to happen? Another take that I had was with the actual, like the release, like the press release from China. Like I opened up and looked at it. It was just like one short sentence, being like, no, this isn't going to happen. And then they cited like for laws and regulation reasons. And it just really struck me just how much, a couple things. One is just they don't feel like they need to really give any explanation or justification. And I think that just plays to how incredibly just like what raw power kind of looks like. Just like, nope, you're not going to do that. And it's also, just the secrecy angle of it, and just kind of how you're left just in the complete dark with like why, or if there's any recourse available. Nope, not how this works. Just total shutdown. And you can take that a step further. It's like when you get something like this, just a simple single sentence like, nope, right? You can see kind of what a chilling effect looks like. Because now all of a sudden, anytime if you wanted to,
Authoritarian.
yeah, just raw, like that's 100%. And you just saw that
Law's the jungle, right?
Law. You see that, yeah, you see that just in that single sentence. And you can see also what a chilling effect would look like, which is now all of a sudden, before you could do anything, you basically are looking for permission. And if you don't get explicit permission, you don't do anything. Because the risk is, it's just comes out of left field, and there's nothing else you can do about it. So like, I think this is an interesting case when we talked about it like a bunch of episodes ago, when you start having to trade economic development with just raw power. And you can kind of see this mechanism, I think, at work here. Xi Jinping is definitely 100% a power-focused person. And I think he chairs like the, whatever that acronym was, the economic like development thing that issued the statement. He chairs that, and like every other council, that's what he did. That's like one of the ways in which that he was able to get so much power. He just put himself at the chair of everything.
Just after that, there was another Chinese entrepreneur, and it was talking about how he was like, I have to set up US-based operations totally separate from any of my Chinese-based operations, just because it's really expensive and it's really difficult to do, but I just have no choice. And and then he was referencing, after seeing this Manus thing, I just have no choice.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, I'd be curious again, and this again, you got to speculate as to how, just what is the mechanism by which Xi's able to do this? If this is in fact a Singaporean country, you got to assume that they're going after the individuals, like the two heads, and they're saying like, nope, sorry, you're not doing this, and you can do all sorts of leverage. I mean, it's not good. There are examples of kind of Chinese journalists over there just getting police come and they take them away to some I mean, you can imagine it. So
They just disappear.
they did, yeah. Obviously, total speculation, but there are ways. And that's my question. It's like, what's the mechanism by which you stop this? You got to wonder, like, maybe this is another sort of leverage thing they're going to be talking about when Xi and Trump meet, kind of to let this deal go through or not. Maybe Zuckerberg can talk to Xi Jinping directly. He's been studying Chinese,
and he's been begging him for over a decade now to.
I think that's right. Yeah, to
allow
let
his
Facebook
products.
in. Yeah. Nope.
It's never happening.
Nope.
All right. Well, with that, this has been another episode of the Root of All Evil podcast. Thanks for tuning in. My name's Joe.
I'm Luke.
And we'll see you next time.